Hi, I'm Tom Graham from Avid, and in this video we're talking about production dialogue workflow from Field Recorder through Media Composer and ultimately into Pro Tools. The material is a short movie I produced for Avid called Agent MX-Z3RO, and helping us show this is our sound supervisor, Scott Weber. Scott, please tell us what we're looking at here.
Sure. Well, what we're looking at here on the Pro Tools screen is the Media Composer AAF output, and you can see that there's multiple channels. On the top is actually a composite track, which is our dialogue guide track, which we'll use for syncing things up. We'll use in the sound effects sessions for ADR, different things. But below here are all the individual tracks that were created in Media Composer. Now, what we want to be able to do is in this particular scene, we have a table full of people sitting around. And on location, they put lab mics on every single one of those actors so that when they get to us in post-production, we want to mix those tracks. We have all the isolated tracks for all the different actors. So the trick here is how do we get from what was cut in the Avid on a single track to those multi-track files for editing.
Right. So in this case, on set we used an 8-channel Diva hard disk recorder with one boom mic, with 6 lavalier microphones on each of the actors, and then a composite mix making up the complete 8 tracks, right?
Sure. Let's actually have a look at some of those files, because what happens is they're a multi-channel WAV file, and similar to what happens when you're using a stereo file, is these files, they're not stereo, but they're actually, they're 8 channels wide. So when you bring in a stereo file, you get a left and a right. Well, when you bring in a poly file such as this with 8 channels, it actually splits it into 8 separate mono files that's compatible with Pro Tools and Media Composer. And you can see here also that the production sound mixer labeled all these tracks for us. So you can see that track 1 is the mono mix, 2 is the boom, lab 1 is 0, we have Yuki. All the different actors are, their different lab numbers and their names are all labeled.
So that's really helpful for you as an editor to have the visual confirmation of what you're hearing, right?
Absolutely. So we get a visual, we have a labeled track, so we know who is recorded on what track when we get into editing in Pro Tools.
Okay, so essentially our video editor checkerboarded back and forth between 2 channels, and this is the production dialogue matching each video clip, correct, Scott?
That's correct. So, so the trick here now is what do we do now to link these files up to those poly files? Well, first what has to happen is after those files are split from poly files, you'll need to take that channel 1, that mix track, and sync it up in the Media Composer so that the metadata and user bit information can then be carried on through the AEF
For Pro Tools audio.
Later into Pro Tools. That's correct.
So our assistant video editor sunk each of the video dailies together with this mono mix track from the poly files inside Media Composer before the picture editor started to create his sequence. All the metadata is maintained in the Media Composer export into Pro Tools.
Correct.
Meanwhile, you've split all those poly wave files in a Pro Tools session and have them ready in your region bin.
That's correct. And then just to restate what you said, all of the files that you want to assemble with have to be in the region bin part of that session.
Okay.
So typically what I like to do is I actually make a session which I split out all the poly files and make a session that has all my master mono files in. Then into this session now, the AAF assemble session, I import those in so they end up in my region bin so I can assemble them. So let's do that. Let's see what we let's look at track 1 here.
Cool. Can we expand those first 2 tracks a bit in size to see better
Sure,
on the screen?
do that. That's a good idea.
And we're going to expand the first 2 channels one at a time. We'll start by right-clicking on the first channel name, AAF01.
Sure.
And we need to first set up the basic settings for the match criteria, which is towards the bottom of the list called Field Recorder Channels Match Criteria.
Right, and what we're going to do to start with, let's just go ahead and reset that so it's at whatever the default setting. And a lot of times I found that's a good place to start because, you know, the folks at Avid, the guys programming this, sort of pick some of the things that work the best. And if you start there, that's a good place to start. And most of the time that should get you where you need to go. If that doesn't, you can start deselecting some of these things. You can see some of the different things: creation date, shoot date, scene and take numbers, tape name, sound roll number. You can even do an assembly just by timecode if you wanted to.
Right.
So there's lots of different criteria you can choose. But for now, let's just go ahead and set it to the default values that we have here.
Okay, and then the next step is to simply right-click again on the track name. This time scroll all the way to the bottom and choose Expand Channels to New Tracks by Match Criteria.
All right, let's see what happens.
And in a matter of seconds, it creates 8 new tracks with the matching channels for that take split out. Now, as you zoom in, Scott, could you tell us a little bit about how you're seeing that extra metadata information in the region names?
Well, that's a good question here. Now, if you look under views, there's under region view, let's take these off for a second just to see the region as you're probably used to seeing with just sort of the name in it. Under views, you get the option of seeing the channel name. So when that goes on, you can see that same data we said before, the lab number and the name. And also, which is also very helpful, we can also see the scene and take information. So you get a lot of data in each region so that you don't have to spend quite as much time trying to hunt around and listen to see which tracks are actually what. You have, they're all labeled properly in the region list.
Right. Well, that's great. And at this point, let's go ahead and actually audition some of these different channels for our lead actor. Perhaps the boom and lav microphones as he sits down at the table to play poker.
That's right. So here, let's just have a look here. Now, we can go over here and we can hit the solo track and we can hear it that way.
So nice to see you all again.
And we can go down and we can solo the next track and we can hear him again.
So nice to see you all again.
So you can tell the difference there. Now, another way that I like to audition tracks, especially if it's in a big session, the tracks are smaller and it's hard to find that solo button all the time, is to go into shuttle mode on Pro Tools. And that's as simple as holding the control key, click on the track you want to go play, and hit the number pad. And 5 is real running time. So let's try that.
So nice to see you all again.
So I can do the same thing, click down here, control 5.
So nice to see you all again.
And if you play another actor's mic, it should be off screen.
So nice to see you all again.
Yeah, so that's actually picking up off the other actresses next to him.
Very cool. So we really have confirmed that metadata that's visible in the region by listening.
That's right.
All right, so we have one more track to expand.
Okay.
Why don't we scroll on down to that?
Let me just make everything small here for a second, and let's just make that one track that we want to do bigger. So this is the second track. So all these above were the ones we just assembled. Now we're going to assemble the second track. So let's right-click on that, expand to new track by match criteria.
Great. Man, that's fast.
And here we go. Let's just roll down a little bit so we can see some of those. And we get the same thing here where let's zoom in a little bit so we can see some of those. And going into, you can see all these people laughing, and this was Turk's close-up. That was the guy there on the right. So
Loose the dead weight, 0.
So there's the bad guy's lav mic, and of course you could find the boom, etc. So at this point, you're now able to dive right into editorial mode and start the dialogue edit process for the takes that the picture editor has selected, and not have spent a ton of time conforming tapes from EDLs or matching things by hand.
that's right.
So thank you very much, Scott. We really appreciate it.
You got it.